Have you ever looked into the eyes of the dead and felt them looking back? Not metaphorically, I mean, really felt it. That sense deep in your spine, that something sees you from beyond whatever line separates breath from stillness. I'm not talking about superstition or poetic mourning. I'm talking about a stare that makes your heart misstep, a nod, a gesture, from someone whose blood hasn't moved in days. That happened to me. In the cold, antiseptic dark of a morgue at 3:12 a.m., I watched a man whose lungs had stopped working 2 days before nod, not once, twice. I didn't scream, I didn't run, I didn't even move at first, because after 8 years of working the midnight shift in that morgue, after logging thousands of cases, seeing hundreds of faces go gray, I thought I had seen it all. But nothing prepares you for the moment death responds, and it wasn't just him. It was everything leading up to that night, signs I didn't notice, truths I didn't want to see, because once you admit the dead are trying to speak, the silence becomes unbearable. I'm not telling you this for entertainment, I'm telling you because I need you to understand, to witness, to ask yourself, what if it was you? What if the dead weren't done? My name is Ellis. I was 23 when I first walked into the basement of St. Erasmus Hospital, wearing my pressed white scrubs and gripping my clipboard like a shield. I'd gotten the job through a friend of my father's, a secure gig, he called it. Quiet, steady hours, no drama. The position, assistant to the head mortician, midnight to 8 a.m., 6 nights a week. The morgue was 4 levels below the main hospital, down a service elevator that groaned like it didn't want to remember what it had carried over the years. You had to punch in 2 separate security codes just to get to the hallway. No windows, no clocks, only that buzzing fluorescent glow that made everything feel like it had been filmed in a different decade. At first, I thought the silence would be the worst part, but silence implies stillness. What I came to understand was that the morgue wasn't still, not exactly. You ever heard a compressor click on in a sealed concrete room? It sounds like a cough from somewhere you can't quite place. The metal drawer sliders squeak when the temperature shifts, like someone pulling themselves forward inch by inch. The refrigeration unit hums at the wrong pitch when it's off balance, vibrating in a way that if you're tired enough feels like a murmur, and the smell, you never forget it. It's not just rot, it's antiseptic layered over decay, bleach mixed with old blood, the trace of cheap hospital soap from a body's last bath. But I adapted. We always do. You learn how to catalog the dead without thinking about who they were. You learn to spot lividity patterns like fingerprints. You learn to joke with your coworkers about things you wouldn't repeat above ground. That was my world. Cold steel, rolling gurneys, the clicking of toe tags, and the quiet certainty that the dead stayed dead, until the night he nodded, and I started to wonder if I had been blind all along. For the first 6 years, nothing truly strange happened. Sure, there were whispers, every hospital has them. Old stories passed around the break room like urban legends, the body that sat up during transport, the drawer that opened on its own, the nurse who swore she saw someone walk out of cold room B at 3 a.m. We laughed. We had to. Gallows humor kept the weight off our chests. The truth is, most nights were boring, tedious really. We logged arrivals, bagged personal effects, photographed the bodies, full angles, face, hands, any identifying marks, all clinical, all procedure. If the body came in after hours, it was my job to document and prep it for the pathologist's morning review. If a family requested a final viewing, I cleaned and positioned the body just right, straightened the collar, closed the jaw, a dab of balm for the lips. I developed a rhythm, pull the chart, verify ID, strip the body, check for jewelry, note trauma or surgical interventions, photograph, store, move on. Death became routine, predictable. The night shift was always quietest between 2ish and 4 a.m. That's when the rest of the hospital seemed to forget we existed. I'd pour myself bad coffee, sit in the observation room, and scroll through old case files. I liked trying to match injuries to stories, reading between the lines of autopsy reports. Sometimes, I'd turn on the old tape recorder we used during initial assessments, just for background noise, just to feel less alone. There was one case I remember especially. A man, maybe in his 40s, found hanging in an apartment stairwell. Suicide, the report said. His name was Lawrence Wendell. No family, no known history of mental illness. Just ended. I logged him, took the photos, noted the ligature marks around the neck, a nylon belt with a partial imprint, Everything matched what we were told. That night, I remember thinking, another one, another clean suicide, nothing more. But there was something I didn't realize then, a detail, a pattern, something I missed, and by the time I looked back, it had already begun. It started with a file. A slow night, maybe 3 weeks after Lawrence Wendell came in. I'd already finished the logs, the cleanup, and there was nothing left to distract me except the archive room. That little side office filled with old case folders, rows of green and manila, curling labels, handwriting that belonged to people long gone. I wasn't supposed to mess with them unless asked, but boredom on a graveyard shift is a dangerous thing. I pulled Wendell's file, intending only to skim, but something caught my attention. It wasn't what was in the report, it was what wasn't. No toxicology request, no mental health history, no background check for next of kin, just a brief narrative, almost dismissive, found suspended from stairwell landing, belt ligature, no signs of foul play. It felt rushed, almost like someone didn't want to ask questions. I dug deeper. I pulled the intake photographs I'd taken, taped to the back of the folder. I had reviewed them before, but that night, something felt off. His neck, the mark left by the belt, wasn't angled upward like it should have been if he'd hanged himself. It was horizontal, flat, as if someone had pulled the belt tight from behind, and his hands, they weren't relaxed, they were curled into fists. Defensive tension. Something was wrong. I checked the storage log. Wendell had already been released to a crematorium. No chance of a second look, so I pulled another file, then another, then 5 more. Each was labeled suicide. Each had the same odd flat compression around the neck, no trauma to the throat, no signs of struggle, but also no investigation. I made a spreadsheet. I started logging names, dates, injuries. A pattern began to emerge, small, almost invisible, but real. These weren't suicides, they were staged. When I brought it up casually to my supervisor, he just nodded slowly and said, "Some things don't go in the report, Ellis." Then he looked away like he hadn't said anything at all. That was when I understood. There was something buried in those drawers, not just bodies, something darker, and someone didn't want it found. The deeper I went, the stranger it got. At first it was just inconsistencies in the files, a missing timestamp here, an incomplete evidence log there, small things. But once you start seeing the cracks, you can't unsee them. You begin to notice all the hairline fractures no one else wants to acknowledge. One night, I was going over Lawrence Wendell's photos again, zoomed in this time, checking for anything I might have missed. That's when I saw it. 4 perfect half-moon impressions just below his left jawline, fingernail marks, but no break in the skin, no scratches, just pressure, precise, controlled pressure. That's not how someone grabs their own throat. I checked the other cases I'd flagged. Same thing. Always 4, always left side, always faint, like whoever did it knew exactly how much force to use. I started staying late after my shift ended, pretending I was reorganizing stock, but really I was checking cold drawers, pulling up the new arrivals, scanning for those marks, running my fingers over skin still cold with the chill of death, and then the air began to change. You know how a room feels when someone's behind you, that subtle pull on your senses. I started getting that all the time in the morgue, even when I was alone. One night around 3 a.m., I stepped into the main chamber and felt it like a wall. The temperature didn't just drop, it plunged. My breath misted, and yet the thermometer on the wall still read 68 degrees. I tapped it. Nothing. Steady. I was standing by drawer C12, a drawer I hadn't opened in weeks. Something knocked. Not loud. Just 3 slow taps like fingertips on steel. I froze. Then again. Knock, knock, knock. I told myself it was the cooling system. Old pipes. My mind playing tricks. But when I opened that drawer, I nearly dropped the handle. The toe tag read, Wendell Lawrence. He had already been cremated. I watched them take the body out myself, except he was there. Same face, same ligature marks, same clenched fists, and his eyes, they weren't shut properly. The lids were parted just enough that I could see the whites, and for a moment, God help me, I thought they shifted. I slammed the drawer shut, backed away. The knocking stopped. No one believed me when I asked. Mix up, they said. Misfiled photo, misidentified body. But I saw it. I know I saw it. After that night, I started locking the cold room door from the inside when I worked, just in case. Because if something was knocking, I didn't want to find out what happened if it got in. I tried to tell myself I was overworked, that grief, repetition, and sleep deprivation were distorting my thoughts. That night shifts had finally cracked something in my brain, so I took a week off. I didn't go anywhere. I just stayed in my apartment, slept during normal hours, read books that had nothing to do with medicine, and avoided mirrors. But when I came back, something had changed. The moment I stepped into the cold room again, I knew it hadn't been stress. The air was different, not just cold, weighted, like walking underwater. That night, I was tasked with processing a body from a suspected suicide. Name, Martin Doyle, mid-50s, found in his garage. Engine running, windows sealed, classic carbon monoxide death. Except, the lividity was wrong. It wasn't pink or even cherry red like CO poisoning would show. It was deep violet, more like asphyxiation. I checked his nails. No soot, no skin residue, and most disturbing, the inside of his mouth blistered, like someone had pressed something scalding against his tongue. That's not suicide. I documented everything, took extra photos, even did a full set of audio logs on the old recorder, one we rarely used anymore. Just my voice describing every detail, time-stamped and deliberate. Then I left the recorder running. Around 7:35 a.m., I returned to stop the recording before the cleaning crew arrived. But when I played it back, something was wrong. At the 2:12 mark, just after I stepped out of the room, the static changed. Beneath it, barely audible, knocks, 4 knocks, spaced evenly, then silence. A few seconds later, a whisper, not a word, just breath, shaped into something intentional. I boosted the audio, played it again and again. Eventually I made it out. Still here, not my voice, not anything I could rationalize. I called the lead pathologist, told him I had concerns, possibly staged suicides, signs of foul play. He agreed to look over the files, but that evening, he was gone, transferred, effective immediately. No notice, no goodbyes, no forwarding contact, and that's when it all clicked. The bruises, the patterns, the cold, the knocks, these weren't random, these were warnings, clues, messages left behind by people who were silenced too carefully, too cleanly. They weren't trying to haunt me, they were trying to tell me what happened, and for the first time, I decided to listen. I needed help, not whispers, not shadows, not another sleepless night alone with corpses and questions. I needed someone who could look at this from the outside, someone with access, reach, and a reason to care. So I made a choice that still scares me. I called Detective Alan Caro. We'd crossed paths a few times during the more violent cases, overdoses, unattended deaths with suspicious circumstances. He was quiet, methodical, and most importantly, not from around here. He'd transferred into the city 3 years earlier from someplace up north, didn't owe favors, didn't play golf with the board. I asked him to meet me off the record. We sat in my car behind the hospital loading dock, 4 a.m. windows fogged from our breath. I think someone's killing people, I said, and staging the bodies to look like suicides. I handed him the file I'd built, names, case numbers, death photos, my notes. At first he said nothing, just flipped through page after page, jaw tightening. Then he looked at me. You know what happens to people who ask the wrong questions in this place? I didn't respond. 3 days later, he called me from a burner phone. His voice was low, urgent. You were right, he said. More than right. He'd pulled archived case files from other counties, some closed, some labeled accidental or non-suspicious. 23 deaths over a 7-year span, all with the same irregularities, all within a 100-mile radius, all with identical physical inconsistencies. No talk screens, no full investigations. Some were found in motels, some in their homes, one in the back of a locked van, with the keys still in his pocket. Every single one was ruled a suicide. Caro dug deeper. 2 of the victims had matching DNA markers, brothers, ex-military, discharged dishonorably for whistleblowing. Another was a former financial auditor for a defense contractor. Another was a nurse, my hospital, 10 years back. She had flagged medical supply theft, then drowned in her bathtub. Different professions, different towns, but all had found something, or said something, they shouldn't have, and all were erased the same way. He said one more thing before hanging up. Ellis, the bodies weren't just arranged, they were prepared. You're not dealing with just a killer, you're dealing with someone who knows exactly how death is supposed to look. Caro didn't sleep for days. Neither did I. He called again after a week, this time with a list. Every one of them, he said, was connected to financial irregularities. Some flagged laundering operations. Others tried to expose insider trades, black budget expenses, misappropriated grants, quiet things, technical crimes that no one noticed until the wrong person looked too closely. They weren't just random victims, he said. They were pressure points. Every one of them tried to blow a whistle. I remember sitting at the steel table in the back of the morgue, fingers locked together, stomach a hollow knot. All those bodies I'd cataloged, processed, wiped down with care. They were warnings, messages, maybe even to others in their world. Stay silent, or end up like this. Caro traced one thread to a regional pharmaceutical firm, small, local, but with big government contracts. 2 of the dead had worked there. Another had audited their logistics division. One was even in a lawsuit against them, until he took his own life by overdosing on a medication that, according to his own medical chart, he wasn't even prescribed. But here's the part that chilled me. When Caro submitted a request to reopen one of the cases, he was denied. Not delayed, denied. Case sealed at federal level. That's what they told him. No appeals. Then the phone calls started. Caro's supervisor warned him to back off and focus on open cases. His car was keyed outside his apartment. Once, someone followed him from the precinct all the way to his block, headlights off. He stopped calling from his regular number after that. Me? I started getting anonymous messages, just static at first, then breathing. One night, I came home to find my apartment door unlocked, but nothing missing. Just a single paper on my kitchen table. One of the photos I'd taken of Lawrence Wendell's ligature mark. No note, no explanation, just that same flat, perfect imprint, like a signature. Caro had one last theory before he went dark. It's organized, he said, like a cleanup crew. You find the leak, stage the suicide, control the narrative. Neat, cold, professional. Who's behind it? I asked. His voice dropped. I don't think we'll ever know, but I know this much. They aren't finished, and neither was I. After Caro disappeared, just stopped returning calls, never came back to the precinct, I kept showing up to work like nothing had changed, but everything had. I began to see the job differently. Every tag, every bruise, every mark was a question. Every body was a story unfinished. I used to see death as the end of a sentence. Now I saw ellipses, pauses, gaps where the truth had been scrubbed out. So I started looking harder. I re-examined every suicide that came through our doors. 3 cases in the next year stood out. One was a teenager found hanging in a storage unit. The position of the knot didn't match the pressure zone on his neck. Another was a man who supposedly shot himself in the chest, but his arms were too short to reach the trigger from that angle. The last was a woman who overdosed on fentanyl, except the puncture wound was on the back of her upper arm. No addict hits there. I flagged each one, sent notes anonymously. Once I mailed a full case folder to an independent journalist I found online. I don't know if she ever opened it. A few months later, I checked her name again. She'd gone offline. No posts, no trace. Still, I kept at it. I'd learned to document in secret. I recorded my audio logs with a second, hidden mic tucked into my jacket. I duplicated photos onto a private drive I kept in a safe deposit box across town. I started hiding my notes in old pathology textbooks in the staff library, places no one bothered to check. But even as I got smarter, I became more afraid. It changed me. I no longer slept through the night. I'd wake at 2:14 a.m., almost every time, my heart pounding, a cold pressure in the room like someone was holding their breath beside me. Once I turned on my phone to record it, and in the playback I heard a single word, close. I used to go days without thinking about the dead. Now they were all I thought about. I memorized their names. I whispered apologies as I zipped them into bags. I'd trace my fingers over bruises, not to clean but to remember. And in those quiet, breathless hours, I began to believe something I never would have accepted before. Maybe, just maybe, they weren't done speaking. Maybe they needed me to listen. There's a moment somewhere between midnight and dawn when the morgue feels almost reverent. It's not just the cold or the hum of the refrigeration. It's something deeper, the kind of silence that isn't empty but expectant, like the air is holding its breath, waiting for something to pass through. That's when I started noticing the patterns. Whispers, soft, like sighs. Sometimes it was my name, sometimes just breath, shaped like language I couldn't quite understand. Lights flickered, but only when I was holding certain files. My breath would fog in rooms where the temperature hadn't changed. The same corner drawer would creak open, just slightly, even after I checked the lock 3 times. I stopped doubting. I stopped questioning. The dead were trying to speak. One night, I sat on the floor of the prep room, back against the cold steel, and whispered, "If you can hear me, I'm listening." The temperature dropped instantly. The lights flickered once, then went out. I wasn't scared, not in the way you'd expect. I was still. Then a soft knock, from inside drawer B6. I stood, opened it slowly. It was empty, but pressed into the foam lining was a fingerprint. Fresh, human, impossible. After that, I started checking the drawers every night, quietly, gently, as if I were asking permission, and sometimes they answered. A knock, a whisper, a shift in air pressure, the faint scent of cologne long faded. That's when I understood. Maybe not everything can be solved with evidence. Maybe some truths speak in their own language, a language of stillness, of detail, of signs left behind by those denied a voice. The most terrifying thing isn't a ghost or a corpse, it's silence where there should be truth. I believe the dead left signs because no one else would fight for them. I believe they found someone willing to listen, willing to name what others buried, and I'll keep listening, because if even one whisper was real, if even one knock was a cry for help, then they're not gone, and neither am I. I don't work at the morgue anymore. I left 3 months ago, quietly, no notice. I packed my locker in the middle of the night, handed in my badge, and walked out the service exit one last time. But I never really left. I still wake up around 2:14 a.m., still hear the hum of refrigeration even in my new apartment. Sometimes I catch the scent of antiseptic when there's no bottle nearby. And every so often, I hear it again, that same soft knock, 3 taps, as if someone is reminding me. I'm still here. I've tried to move on, tried to build a life outside of steel drawers and sealed records. I volunteer at a hospice now. It's quieter there. The deaths are slower, the grief more present. There's dignity in it. But when I close my eyes, I still see the toe tags. Wendell, Doyle, Brennan, the ones who didn't die on their own terms, the ones who were silenced, then posed to look peaceful, and I still listen. Sometimes I'll hear a whisper in the background of an old voice memo I forgot I recorded. Sometimes I'll find my files slightly shifted, even when I know I locked them away. I keep a journal now, a careful one, just in case something ever happens to me. It's in a safe, with copies. Because if I vanish, if I fall, or slip, or choose to end it, you should know I didn't. And if you're watching this, maybe now you've seen what I saw. Not the blood, not the bruises, not the cold rooms, but the quiet horror of a system that helps bury the truth, and the quiet resistance of the ones who wouldn't stay buried. So I'll ask you this: have you ever heard a knock in an empty room? Ever felt someone behind you, but turned around to nothing? Ever thought for just a second that maybe the dead weren't finished speaking? If you have, don't ignore it, because sometimes the only justice left is a whisper in the dark, and if it's real, I'll hear it, I'll be listening, and I'll keep listening, until someone finally listens back.